Hello all. Today we are going to learn how to clean coconut. However, I don't want to waste the coconut, so I am going to make a fresh coconut cake. We are going to start making the cake portion first, and I am using a recipe called white butter cake to make the cake. And for those of you who are my students, it is in your recipe book, and I'm going to hold it up quickly here. Hopefully you can see it well enough to take a screenshot of it. And I did cut the recipe down to a smaller quantity so you can see the 1 10-inch cake size. And our recipe book normally has these 6 10-inch cakes. I do have everything pre-measured out. And our recipe first says to cream our butter and our sugar. So I already have my 2 sticks or 8 ounces of butter in my bowl, and I do have it softened up. And I have my granulated sugar, my 14 ounces, and I did pre-scale everything, and I really like to use my digital scale, and because it is so much more accurate to measure on a scale compared to measuring by volume. However, I do have conversions for my ingredients in volume on my recipe, just in case you do not have a digital scale at home. I do recognize, especially a lot of my students may not have them at home, but once I got a scale, I just use it so much now. And it also will measure in grams, and I really measure so much stuff now, more in metrics than I do in US units, because we can get so much more accurate. There's only 8 ounces in a cup, but there's the gram measurement is so much smaller, such a smaller unit of measure than an ounce measurement, that we can measure so much more accurately in grams. All right, so my recipe tells me to cream my butter and sugar. I'm going to put that on my mixer here. Let it cream. Check to make sure I don't have any clumps of butter. I'm going to push down here. Okay, we're going to let that cream for a couple of minutes. And I do have the recipe. So I have 8 ounces of butter or 2 sticks. I have 14 ounces of granulated sugar. Mix it in there, and that measures by volume 1 3/4 cups. And I have my 6 ounces of egg whites. And I did actually make coconut cream pie last week. And I'm not a meringue fan, so I did freeze my egg whites and pull them back out. And just hold them and warm them up to room temperature to use for this recipe. And so that's 6 ounces of egg whites, cake flour. I have my 11 1/4 ounces, and that equals about 2 2/3 cups in volume measurement. And just make sure you're scooping. Don't scoop flour with the measuring cup you're measuring in, or you're going to have a lot more. So make sure you're lightly scooping the flour into your measuring cup and leveling it off so you don't have too much flour. And then I have my baking powder and my salt, and they are in here. And I have a tablespoon and 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and I have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And they are sharing the same dish because I don't like to wash dishes. And then I have my milk. My milk is 3/4 cup of milk. So I have my milk and a 1/2 cup of water, which is measured out as well, and my teaspoon of vanilla. So the next thing the recipe tells me to do is to add the whites a few at a time. I'm going to go ahead and cream it up just a little bit here. I want that mix just a little bit more. And then we're going to go ahead and add our whites. So this recipe does make, the size that I'm making today does make 1 10-inch cake. I'm actually making an 8-inch cake because I want a little extra batter left over, because my son will not eat coconut cake. He doesn't like coconut. And so I'm going to scoop out a couple of vanilla cupcakes for him, and just ice them with a little bit of quick ganache or something, so he has something that he can enjoy for dessert tonight too. I'm going to go ahead and start adding my eggs, whites. Okay. Just add a few at a time. Just scrape down my bowl, make sure any of that butter and sugar mixture is incorporating along with the whites. Okay, let me get that. Let that mix. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my remaining whites. So, now the next thing the recipe calls for is to sift the flour, baking powder, and salt. So I'd love to just use my little strainer at home. So I'm going to add my flour. And my baking powder and salt. And just sift that through. So this is called a white butter cake. It's called a white cake because it doesn't have the egg yolks in it. There are some people who say that white cakes are not as moist as a vanilla cake because of the lack of the egg yolks, which are high in fat. But this has a lot of butter in there to compensate for that, and it's still quite a tasty cake. And when we are done, we will add some simple syrup, and I will also be icing the cake with whipped cream and adding a fresh coconut, so it'll be plenty moist. So that is the difference between a white cake and what people call a yellow cake, is that the yellow cake does have egg yolks and the white does not. A lot of people just like to call their cakes vanilla cakes today, but if they do not have any egg yolks, they are typically called white cakes. Okay, so I'm going to alternate the dry and the liquid ingredients. So my liquid ingredients here is my water, my milk, and my vanilla. So I'm going to go ahead and add these. I'm just going to mix my vanilla out a little. Mix all my liquids. Okay, so now that I have my liquids and my dries combined together, I'm going to add them in alternately. I've added about half my dry and about half my liquids. I'm going to stack the bowl mixer, make sure I don't have any, clean off my bottoms and sides of my bowl real good. So whenever you scrape down your bowl, make sure you incorporate again, mix again, just to make sure anything that you did scrape off is incorporated and blending run you through before you finish adding your ingredients. I have the remaining flour here. And then the remaining liquids. I'm going to add this a little bit. I'm actually going to stop it and mix it down in here. This one, set it down slowly. That helps make sure that my batter is lump free. I'm going to scrape that one more time here before adding the remaining milk. Go ahead and turn the oven on. Okay, so now I'm smooth. I'm going to go ahead and add the remaining milk and mix that till it incorporates. Okay, so let me get my batter out of my paddle over here. Okay, and then here's my cake batter. I'm going to go ahead and fill my pan. I've got a 2-inch cake pan prepared. An 8-inch round cake pan. Like I said, this will make a 10-inch, but I'm just making an 8. I want batter for cupcakes. I have parchment lined. You can go ahead and grease your pan with shortening oil the old-fashioned way, and then flour it. Another, what I prefer to use even over that when I'm making some kind of quick breads. I don't, or even yeast raised breads. I don't use parchment typically in loaf pans, and I will mix a flour equal parts of oil, shortening, and bread flour. And you can use all-purpose flour if you don't have bread flour. It's not a big deal. And I just mix those up and use that for pan grease. And I just brush that on with a pastry brush, and that is a very nice product to use. And I just think it's even better than using. It's definitely better than using any kind of pan sprays, and even greasing and flouring. If I'm making a bundt cake that has all the little nooks and crannies in it, the cakes unmold so much more easily with the pan grease. And again, that's equal parts by weight, oil, shortening, and flour. So for instance, you can use an ounce of oil, an ounce of shortening, and an ounce of flour, and just make up a small portion of that. It does hold well. I usually make some and store in a container, so I might use like 4 ounces of oil and 4 ounces of shortening and 4 ounces of bread flour, and it will hold for a month or two, just in your pantry in a sealed container. All right, I have my cake pan filled. I'm going to go and fill up some cupcake pans, and I have these cupcakes left over from a event. I teach Baking and Pastry Arts, Lancaster County Career and Tech Center in Mount Joy, and I'm working on some home lessons for my students since we can't have demonstrations in school right now. And I'm very particular on making sure that scoops are level, because these are an amazing portioning device if they're used properly. All right. So I should turn my oven on a little bit earlier. We're just going to wait for that to preheat. So I move on to the coconut. I'm going to clean up here. Okay. So I purchased 2 coconuts, only because one would be enough for my coconut cake, only because I've had a time or two where you've opened one up and it's bad, and I really don't want to do that for this lesson, so my intention is to clean them both, and then I'm going to freeze the additional coconut. One thing I want to point out is if you're not the most coordinated person cleaning coconuts, can at times be careful. Don't hurt yourself. In other words, don't anyone get hurt trying to do this at home. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. Not all grocery stores have this on here. It doesn't really matter. When I purchase coconuts, the one thing I want to point out is I always shake it. You can hear the liquid in there. You want to make sure they have liquid. And coconuts have 3 eyes. And we're going to punch out 2 of those eyes and drain the liquid out. And I actually have a little strainer and a coffee filter. And I'm going to strain the liquid through because we're going to actually use the liquid from inside, which we call either coconut water or coconut liqueur, some people call it. And we're going to use that to make simple syrup for our fresh coconut cakes. So I do have some tools here that I thoroughly washed. This is actually from my husband's garage, and it's used to recess nails like below the grate of the wall. So when you fill them over, you don't see the nail heads. And it works great to punch out 2 eyes. I've also used like fat nails and like stuff like that before. So I'm just going to go ahead and punch out 2 of the eyes here. And I do have it on a towel just to help keep the coconut itself from slipping around. I've got 1 eye punched out. Move on to the next eye. So I'm going to go ahead and drain the juice. And I punch out 2 eyes because that helps air go into the coconut while you're letting juice run out of the other eye. That old principle of when something comes in, something goes out. Air needs to have a way to get in to fill that void. And so, all right. Now what I'm going to do with this coconut is once my oven preheats, I'm going to put this in the oven with my cake and bake it for about 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes. One thing I want to point out is I noticed these coconuts are called groovy coconuts, grooved for easy opening, and that may be great to be able to crack them open. The problem is you know, there's sometimes a trick to things and making things easier to be able to prepare. And the trick to coconuts is getting the shell to release from the brown skin layer on the inside of the coconut. And that's why we throw it in the oven. So we're going to put it in there for about 20-25 minutes. And that's going to help the shell itself release from the skin. And I'll show you how to clean it from there. Okay, our oven's preheated. I'm going to go ahead and drain the coconut water from the other coconut and get them in the oven along with my cakes. And we'll be back in a little bit. Okay, we're back to just take a quick glimpse and see what's going on in the oven. I'm going to try to move my camera down here so you can see. Hopefully you can see that. Turn the obnoxious timer off. And in my oven here, I've got my, oh, be gentle, don't want to bump that cake too much or it'll collapse. And I've got my cupcakes out here and I'm just checking them to make sure that they're pretty set. They look, and I'm leaving a little finger indent, but I think they're pretty firm inside. Springing back just a little, so I think they're done. My coconut has 10 more minutes yet in the oven, and my cake at least 15 or 20. So we'll see you back here in a little bit. Okay, we are back. Our coconuts have been toasted, and I have my cake out of the oven. It's still really hot. We're going to let that cool. And while that's cooling, we're going to talk a little bit more about coconuts. So one thing I wanted to point out is I talked to you about purchasing coconuts, and I also wanted to mention when you're buying them, you kind of want to look around the eyes and look at any of the seams or the so-called grooves that they put it in it to make it easier to clean, just to make sure that there's nothing seeping, and there's no pink or moldy type stuff. So that's a good way to check. And every once in a while, it's still bad on the inside, but sometimes you can tell from the outside. So in addition to looking for liquid in them, you want to just visually look and make sure that they look nice and healthy as well. All right, these have baked in my oven for about 25 minutes at 350 degrees. And you can see this one here. I don't know how well you can see it, but you can see the skin, the shell is already just peeling off of the meat itself. So you literally, this one here is really easy, and I'm able to just break the whole piece out. So sometimes they don't always come out that easy. I got lucky. This one is not as easy. I'm actually going to take my hammer here. Again, do not hit yourself. Hurt yourself or hit yourself, and then I can break the shell away. And this looks like it needs another little hit with the hammer. And I did have a screwdriver that I washed too, because every once in a while I do need to like pry a piece away with the screwdriver, but these came out really easy and whole, and they don't always come out whole like this. I got really lucky. So that makes cleaning really easy. So the next thing I'm going to do with my coconuts is peel them. And I'm just taking a vegetable peeler here and peeling them. And sometimes I'm peeling bits and pieces because they don't always come out so nice. And if it's hard to, if the shape makes it hard with the peeler, you can use a paring knife, but you have a lot of waste that way. A vegetable peeler is a lot less waste. So I'm going to go ahead and peel these. And I am going to break them open before I wash them, because when I punched out the eyes to pour out the coconut, the core or coconut water, I probably got a little bit of shell and pieces on the inside. So I do want to break them open, and I'm just going to wash these pieces in my sink before I grate them up. I did also want to come back to the coconut water. I did take a little bit and add some sugar. So I took about 2 ounces of coconut water and 1 ounce of sugar and dissolved it in the microwave. I'm going to use that for my dessert syrup. Since it's flavored, it's a dessert syrup. Unflavored would be simple syrup for moisten my cake. And I did get a lot of liquid from these 2 coconuts. I had almost a cup from the 2 coconuts, and I really don't want to waste it. The coconut water, it doesn't, some people may argue with me, it's not the best tasting. It is unsweetened. And though I do enjoy eating the coconut meat with just on its own, the coconut water, I mean, it does have a flavor to it, but it's not that enjoyable without sugar, but it's very nutrient dense, and I don't want to waste it. So I'm going to actually freeze that as well. And I'm going to use it for liquid for smoothies. I do make a lot of smoothies just with yogurt and fruit and some kind of liquid. Sometimes I'll use juice, sometimes I'll use milk and fruit and ice. And I'm just going to use that for my liquid. I always need a little bit of liquid in there to get it to blend real smooth. And it's very nutrient dense and a good way to use that up. And I'll probably be putting some of my coconut meat in there as well. The one thing I want to talk about too is coconut milk actually comes from the actual meat part of the coconut. Okay, so it is actually pressed from the coconut meat itself. My board is really dirty. I don't want to sit this. I'm going to wash them. I just want to break it open so you can see the inside real quick. You can see the inside, and there are some flecks in there of of dirt that got in there from punching out the eyes. And I'm going to make sure I wash that out. So, and coconut milk is really, it is very high in fat, and it is not a healthy fat for you. So the coconut water is not high in fat and is nutrient dense. The coconut meat itself is a higher fat product. Okay, hi again. I'm back. I have my coconut washed and it's all peeled and washed, and I'm going to go ahead and grate some up. Okay. So I'm going to keep breaking this up and run it through the grater. You can hand grate it as well with a box grater, a little hand grater, though that'll watch your knuckles. And some people may have some older graters that are aluminum. You just want to be careful of those because it can cause a great discoloration in your coconut. All right, my coconut is all grated here, and I've got quite a bit of coconut from those 2 coconuts. And the texture of the fresh coconut is certainly a lot different than coconut that you would get dried in a bag. And then actually to eat it, it has a crunchy texture. And you can buy coconut unsweetened, though a lot of the dried coconut is sweetened. And, that really does change the taste of it a lot. And just the fact that it's also dried out and it's a lower moisture content. So I really do enjoy eating pieces of fresh coconut. It has a very different texture. There's a crunchiness to it that you don't get in dried coconut. Okay, so last thing I need to make for my cake is my whipped cream. I already have my vanilla in my bowl, and I have a teaspoon of vanilla. I'm going to add a cup of heavy cream. Now I'm just doing my 8-inch cake, so I only have 1 cup of heavy cream here. I think that's I can get by with 1 cup. If I was doing the whole 10-inch, I would need 2 cups, so I would need double the recipe. And I have 1/4 of a cup of my confectioner's sugar. So I'm going to go ahead and whip that on my mixer. Okay, I have my whipped cream here. I want it to be nice and smooth looking. If you overmix whipped cream, it is very easy to curdle. But I want it thick enough that it is not going to run down the side of the cake when I'm trying to ice the cake. Okay, I have my cream whipped, and I'm going to go ahead and slice my cake in half. It is nice and cold now. Again, when I'm slicing a cake, I'm using my wheel. I'm holding my knife in one spot, and I'm just going to slice this cake in half to make a 2-layer cake. And I can pop my cake off and put the other piece on my plate. I'm going to head and get my coconut simple syrup that I made. It's 2 ounces of the coconut liqueur and 1 ounce of granulated sugar dissolved in the microwave. And I'm going to put a thin layer of my whipped cream in. Again, when I'm spreading my icing, just using the tip of my palette, and I'm always twisting it to make sure that my icing stays and doesn't pull back on me. Okay, so now I am going to put in a layer of fresh coconut. Now I'm going to place my cake layer on top. And I did want to make sure my cake, I let it completely cool. It is very fresh, but I did make sure that it was completely cool. Whipped cream melts very easily, and you want to make sure that your cake is very cool before you start. Okay, I'm going to add my remaining simple syrup. All right. And I want to make sure I get the edges because the edges are exposed to the most heat in the oven. And so they're going to be the driest part of your cake. So you want to make sure you don't forget to stir up your edges. didn't have a actual corrugated cake circle, and I just took a piece of cardboard and cut it, traced my pan and cut it, and covered it with butcher paper so that it was food safe. All right, so there's the size of my cake ice. I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of my cream. And this has actually turned out to be the perfect quantity for an 8-inch cake. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and okay, so now I want to pick up my cake. And just move my wheel out of the way. And I'm just going to mask the sides of my cake with the fresh coconut. And this cake will freeze well too if you don't have the time to make it right before. You can always make it the week before and freeze it, or the day before and just refrigerate it. Now remember, coconut, once it is opened, it may not be refrigerated in the grocery store when you get them, but once you open them, they are perishable, as well as the coconut liquid, and they do have to be refrigerated once they've been opened because now they're exposed to oxygen. And coconut doesn't really hold that long in the fridge. So if I'm going to keep fresh coconut beyond just a couple days, I always put it in the freezer. I hope you've enjoyed the video and have a great night.